Imagine this for a moment. You're standing inside a packed nightclub in New York, sometime in the early 20th century. The lights are low, the air is thick with cigarette smoke, and everyone in the room is dressed like they walked straight out of a classic mob movie. Voices fade, glasses clink, and the whole place hums like it's alive. Then the spotlight hits the stage. A young Frank Sinatra steps forward, suit sharp, eyes calm, and the moment he leans toward the mic, the entire room freezes. His voice pours out like warm whiskey sliding across ice. Smooth, slow, dangerous in the best way. People melt into their seats. Strangers stop mid-sentence. It feels like time itself pauses just to listen. But here's what the crowd doesn't see. Behind the curtains, in the darkest corner of the room, sit a group of men in tailored suits, worth more than the club itself. Men nobody jokes with, men nobody looks in the eyes, men the city whispers about but never names out loud. The Mafia. And rumor says, Sinatra wasn't just singing for them. He was connected to them, protected by them, maybe even shaped by them. They knew Frank. Frank knew them, maybe a little too well. Tonight we're diving deep, into the shadows behind the spotlight, into the friendships nobody mentioned, into the favors nobody questioned. Frank Sinatra versus the Mafia. The hidden connections Hollywood never wanted to talk about. Picture a late-night club in New York, sometime in the early 20th century. The room is dim and filled with cigarette smoke. People are drinking, laughing, whispering. It's the kind of night where the world outside feels distant. The lights shift, a single spotlight turns on, and a young Frank Sinatra steps toward the microphone, wearing a suit that fits like it was stitched for destiny. The moment he starts to sing, the room freezes. His voice is warm, smooth, almost liquid. It slides through the crowd like a soft breeze, and suddenly everyone forgets their drinks, their problems, their conversations. They are locked onto the man with the blue eyes and the impossible voice. But somewhere in the back of that club, half hidden in the shadows, sits a group of men who don't clap, don't smile, and don't look impressed. They're not here for music, they're here for business. Their suits are expensive, their eyes sharp, and their presence heavy. They're part of a world most people fear. They're the Mafia. And whether Frank knew it or not, this moment wasn't just another performance. It was the beginning of a story that followed him his entire life. A story of influence, danger, protection, and whispers that never fully faded. Frank Sinatra wasn't born into elegance. He came from Hoboken, New Jersey, a rough neighborhood made of crowded buildings, loud families, and streets where you learned fast or got pushed aside. Hoboken in those days was built by Italian immigrants who worked hard but lived harder. Every house carried the smell of cooking, every corner carried the sound of arguments, and every night carried the same silent truth: survival came first. Frank grew up in a small apartment above a bar. Fights breaking out downstairs, drunks yelling at strangers, bottles shattering on sidewalks. This was normal. And in Italian neighborhoods back then, the Mafia wasn't a rumor, it was a presence. People respected them or feared them, sometimes both at the same time. Nobody said too much. Nobody asked too much. Everybody knew the rules. Frank learned those rules early. Keep your eyes steady. Don't talk more than necessary. Never cross the wrong people. But Frank also carried something the neighborhood didn't expect: a voice. And not just any voice, but a gift that sounded almost unreal. Even the toughest men in Hoboken stopped to listen when Frank sang. He wasn't strong with his fists, but with his voice, he could bring a room to its knees. He didn't want to stay in Hoboken forever. He wanted lights, stages, crowds, applause. He wanted to be bigger than anything he saw around him. But dreams don't open doors. In that era, doors were opened by powerful men. And many of those powerful men didn't work for the government or music labels. They worked in the shadows. When Frank began singing in small bars, he had talent. But talent alone didn't get you prime spots. Not in that time. You needed someone to vouch for you. Someone who controlled the clubs, the bars, the flow of money, and the people inside them. That's when Willie Moretti entered the picture. Moretti wasn't a producer or an agent. He was a respected figure in the Mafia world, a man people didn't argue with. Moretti liked Frank. Some say he more than liked him. He believed Frank could become something huge, and the Mafia understood how to turn potential into real power. Suddenly, Frank started getting gigs he never had a chance at before. Bars that refused him suddenly made room. Clubs that didn't know his name suddenly wanted him on stage. People whispered, but no one asked questions. In those times, asking too many questions could shorten your life. There was a story about a club owner who refused to book Frank, saying the kid was too skinny, too soft, too gentle for the nightclub scene. The next night, Moretti dropped by for a friendly visit, and the night after that, Frank Sinatra was the headliner. People pretended it was luck. Others pretended not to notice. But everyone knew when the Mafia made a move, you didn't fight it. Frank eventually joined Tommy Dorsey's band, and that changed everything. His voice grew stronger, his style sharper, and his fame exploded. But behind the glamour was a contract that held him tightly. Dorsey demanded a large cut of Frank's income and complete control over his future. Frank felt trapped. He wanted out. Dorsey didn't want to let him go. Then something strange happened. The contract ended suddenly, quietly. No yelling, no legal battle, no dramatic fallout, just over. Rumors spread fast. Some said Dorsey was visited by men who encouraged him to release Frank. Some said a gun was placed gently on the table as a reminder. Others said Dorsey realized fighting certain men was a losing game. Years later, Dorsey hinted that he was relieved to let Frank go because, in his words, the people behind him were too strong. That moment launched Frank Sinatra into the stratosphere. His fame skyrocketed. He wasn't just a rising singer anymore. He was on his way to becoming a national icon. But the whispers grew louder. Was Frank protected? Was he connected? Was he benefiting from the most dangerous organization in America? No one knew the truth, and those who did kept their mouths shut. Frank Sinatra's fame was rising fast. But with fame came eyes. People watched him, admired him, envied him, studied him. Yet behind the glow of his public success, another world was watching him more closely than anyone else. A world that didn't clap. A world that didn't cheer. A world that didn't forgive mistakes. As Sinatra's star rose, so did the whispers. People spoke quietly about who might be helping him, who might be protecting him, and who might be guiding his path behind closed doors. In those days, America's entertainment scene wasn't controlled by talent agencies the way it is now. It was heavily influenced by individuals who understood money, power, loyalty, and fear better than anybody else. People who built fortunes from shadows. People who respected silence above all. Whenever Sinatra walked into a club or hotel, there was a strange energy around him. Staff treated him like royalty, even before he officially became one. Bartenders leaned in a little closer, waiters moved a little faster, and managers made sure every detail around him felt perfect. It wasn't just respect for a rising star. It was something deeper. It was the kind of treatment given to someone connected to powerful men. Sinatra never openly bragged about his associations, but he didn't hide them either. There were nights when he could be seen laughing with men who didn't laugh often. Men who moved like they carried secrets in their coat pockets. Men whose names didn't appear in newspapers unless someone had disappeared or something had gone wrong. One of those men was Sam Giancana, a name whispered in Chicago and feared across the country. Giancana was known for his charm and his brutality, someone who could smile at you and threaten you in the same breath. Sinatra and Giancana were seen together at dinners, private lounges, and exclusive gatherings where the music was soft, the drinks were strong, and the conversations were never repeated outside the room. These interactions did not go unnoticed. The FBI, already suspicious of Sinatra's sudden rise and unique access, began keeping files on him. Not thin files, thick ones. page after page, collecting sightings, conversations, photographs, rumors, and anything they believed could build a bigger picture. They tracked who he met, where he traveled, and which high-profile events he attended. They were concerned, but they were also confused. Sinatra wasn't a criminal. He wasn't involved in violence. He was a singer, a performer, a man who moved crowds with his voice, not with intimidation. Yet he kept appearing around people the FBI watched for an entirely different reason. Sinatra didn't deny knowing these men. He brushed it off casually, often saying they were just fans who liked music, or that he didn't judge people based on their reputations. He always used simple explanations that sounded harmless enough, but the FBI didn't buy it. In their eyes, Sinatra's circle was too unusual, too selective, and too close to men who were considered untouchable. Vegas became the centerpiece of this strange relationship. When Sinatra performed in Las Vegas, he wasn't just a star, he was an event. Hotels rolled out carpets taller than their security guards. Casino bosses smiled wider than they needed to. Guests paid fortunes just to be in the same room as him. And behind almost every major casino in that era, hidden behind the glamour and bright signs, was mob money. Cash that built the buildings, purchased the stages, and controlled the flow of business inside. Sinatra didn't just perform in these casinos. He was embraced by them. He was invited backstage, into private rooms where deals were made without paperwork, where handshakes carried more weight than legal documents. He was treated like a favorite son of Las Vegas. Some said he was untouchable there. Others said he was protected. One night in Vegas, Sinatra arrived at a hotel and walked into a room full of gamblers, dealers, guards, and executives. And as soon as he stepped inside, something eerie happened. The entire room paused, not out of respect for a celebrity, but like something more powerful had entered. People straightened their posture, lowered their voices, and watched him with a strange mix of admiration and caution. Moments later, a group of men walked in behind him, men with ties to families that controlled large parts of the city's underground economy. No one introduced them. No one needed to. Their presence said everything. Sinatra wasn't walking alone. This wasn't just his world. It was their world too, and they allowed him into it with open arms. As his popularity continued to grow, Sinatra started building friendships with politicians. He loved influence. He loved being part of conversations larger than entertainment. And the biggest connection of all was his support for John F. Kennedy. Sinatra campaigned for him, invited him to Hollywood parties, and made sure the right people met the right people at the right time. But when politics and the mob crossed paths, trouble followed. Some claimed Sinatra acted as a bridge between Kennedy's campaign and individuals who controlled key voting districts. Others dismissed it as exaggerated gossip. But the timing was suspicious. Kennedy won. Sinatra celebrated, and the Mafia watched from the distance, expecting something in return. Eventually, Kennedy backed away from Sinatra. Their friendship faded almost overnight. Sinatra reportedly felt betrayed, humiliated, and confused. But from the outside, it looked like Kennedy needed to protect his image, especially with the FBI digging into Sinatra's connections and asking questions no one wanted to answer. Sinatra didn't show his hurt publicly, but those close to him said he took it personally. He had opened doors for Kennedy, and suddenly those doors slammed shut in his face. Behind Sinatra's calm smile, something darker was growing. A frustration, a feeling of being misunderstood, a belief that people judged him for relationships he believed were harmless. To him, these were just men he knew. To the world, they were criminals. To the FBI, they were threats. And Sinatra was caught between all three. In private, he tried to distance himself. He pulled back from certain gatherings, avoided certain clubs, and kept a polite but quiet distance from men who once sat at his table. But once rumors attach themselves to a legend, they don't fade. They stick. They grow. They become part of the myth. Sinatra, despite all his fame, couldn't escape the shadow cast by the Mafia, and the more he tried to outrun it, the more people believed the opposite. He had talent, charm, charisma, and influence. But he also had a past that followed him everywhere he went. A past he never fully explained, and a past no one ever fully understood. Yet in all of this, one thing stayed true. Sinatra knew how to perform, and the world kept watching. In the final years of his life, Sinatra stood on stages that looked nothing like the smoky back rooms where he began. The clubs were brighter, the sound systems louder, and the audiences larger than anything he could have imagined as a skinny kid from Hoboken. Yet even with all the evolution around him, there was something in his presence that never changed. A calm confidence, a quiet understanding, a look in his eyes that suggested he had lived 1,000 lives before stepping on stage. People loved him. People argued about him. People studied him. But no one could define him completely. He was too big for that. Too layered. Too real. And for every fan who adored his voice, there was someone else still asking questions about the shadows behind him. Reporters continued searching for proof. Biographers dug through old stories. And the FBI files those thick stacks of paper filled with sightings, assumptions, and unanswered theories became a part of his legacy, whether he liked it or not. But even those files told an incomplete story. They had observations, but not explanations. Names, but not truths. Photos, but not context. The government spent years watching Sinatra, but in the end, they were just as unsure as the public. Sinatra, somehow, had managed to live a legendary life right under the nose of one of the most powerful investigative agencies in the world, and still walked away with more secrets than they uncovered. As he aged, he softened. The tough edges remained, but they were wrapped in nostalgia and experience. His voice grew deeper, slower, carrying a kind of weight only time can bring. When he sang later in life, people didn't just hear the notes, they heard the years behind them. The battles won, the mistakes made, the victories celebrated, and the friendships buried beneath decades of silence. He had lived through eras where fame was simple, then eras where fame was dangerous, then eras where fame became larger than humanity itself. Through all of it, he stood tall. There were moments in his later years when people asked him directly about the rumors. He always smiled with that half-amused, half-tired expression. Not a denial, not an admission. Just a quiet acknowledgement that his life had been bigger than anyone could fit into a single explanation. Maybe he knew the truth wasn't the point. Maybe he understood something the rest of the world didn't. That mystery keeps legends alive. When Sinatra finally left this world, the news spread everywhere. Radio stations played his music nonstop. Cities lit up landmarks in his honor. Casinos in Las Vegas dimmed their lights for a moment, something they rarely did for anyone. People who grew up with him felt like a chapter of American history had closed. And even then, even on that day, the whispers returned. People asked the same old question. Who was Frank Sinatra really? A hero? A prodigy? A charmer? A man shaped by powerful friends? A man protected by forces the world feared? A man who simply happened to grow up in the kind of neighborhood where the Mafia was part of the wallpaper? Maybe he was all of them. Maybe he was none. In the end, what survived was not the suspicion, not the files, not the rumors. What survived was the voice. The music that floated above everything else. Songs that outlived the men who loved him, the men who feared him, and the men who might have helped him. Frank Sinatra left behind something more powerful than answers. He left behind an aura, a presence that still lingers in American culture, like cigarette smoke in an old nightclub. When his songs play today, the world feels different for a moment. Softer, warmer, fuller. His voice carries a nostalgia that makes strangers stop and breathe. No rumor, not even the dark ones, can erase that. So the story ends here, drifting between truth and legend, between spotlight and shadow, between the voice on stage and the whispers behind the curtain. Frank Sinatra walked through worlds most people only dream about. And whether he stood beside kings, presidents, or men the law could never catch, one fact remains untouched. He sang, he survived, He lived a life that felt larger than the country itself. And he left the stage with secrets no one will ever fully understand. That mystery? That's the part of him that never dies. In the end, the world never learned the full truth about Frank Sinatra's ties to the Mafia, and maybe that's exactly how he wanted it. The music stayed, the rumors stayed, and the legend only grew bigger. Some stories end with answers. His ends with a question that will echo long after the lights fade. If you enjoyed stepping into the shadows behind Sinatra's rise, stick around. There are more stories buried in American history that deserve to be told. Sinatra's truth may be gone with him, but the legends never stop. Drop a comment and tell me which mystery you want next. And if you're new here, welcome to the side of history nobody talks about.